Welcome to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast. It is a spin-off of the website and book review site of Amy's Bookshelf Reviews. Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast is about book reviews, a writer's muse, a book's peruse, author interviews, and literary news. Welcome to the new year, where new things may happen with this. I hope you all enjoy, and thank you for listening.
I'm just going to go ahead and...
Good evening, listeners. I'm Amy, and welcome to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast. Today, we are joined by an author. Will you please introduce yourself and let the audience know how they can connect with you?
Hi, my name's Bartlette. My name that I publish under is D.R. Bartlette, and you can find me on Facebook and on Blue Sky, just as D.R. Bartlette with an E on the end.
Nice. So, from what I understand, is the Drummond affair, Dumond? It's Dumond, right?
Yes.
Affair. Sorry, I don't know. But so what? This is your debut book, right? Is this the first true crime book, or is it just first book in general?
It's my first true crime book. I published a novel back in 2017, but this is my first nonfiction book.
Oh, that sounds really interesting. So, I when I read true crime, I also kind of like after I read it, look more about like the articles that might be online and news articles and things like that. But I was curious of what got you really interested in this case.
Well, I've been interested in the case since it first happened, the Dumond case, because I live here in Arkansas. And so it was, being covered in a lot of our media, our state and local media. And then when it kind of burst into the public spotlight in 2008, whenever our former governor, Mike Huckabee, was running for president. I was like, oh my gosh, they haven't even gone into half of it. It's just sort of a gotcha moment for him. But what really made me want to write the book was in the immediate aftermath of the Pizzagate affair. I heard a lot of national media and analysis that were just shocked. How could somebody possibly believe this crazy conspiracy theory that the Clintons are like, satanic pedophiles and eating children and drinking their blood and all this craziness? And I was like sitting here in Arkansas, far away, going, I know why they believe that. This is the kind of thing that's been going on for decades. And so it just kind of inspired me to write the book, to kind of go back to the origins of where these conspiracy theories started and how, at their very beginning, they caused real world harm. And so that's what the Dumont affair is.
Yeah, I mean, I in reading it, and I skimmed through it again this morning so I could just kind of refamiliarize myself with it. And it's just this it feels like this poor young girl who was raped, and it just became something that I just wonder how it it snowballed and everything like that. Could understand or how it would affect that poor girl. I mean, that's one thing that I kept thinking, oh geez, uh I grew up in the 80s, and 70s, 80s, somewhere in there. But it's the I just kept thinking about her, and then I'm like, just this young girl, she cheerleader, she gets raped, rapist is caught, but then it just unravels from there. And the idea of the local sheriff having his testicles displayed, just kind of like, I was like, okay.
Yeah, the story just gets progressively crazier and weirder as it goes along. And yeah, that's kind of the thing about it that bothered me the most too, was that there was this young woman, she was 17 when Wayne Dumond kidnapped her and raped her. Um, you know, at that time, and in some media outlets still, they don't publish the names of minors who are victims of crimes.
Right.
And so her name wasn't out there, but she was getting just all this hatred based on this backlash that had been stirred up by Wayne Dumond's wife at the time, Dusty Dumond. And Dusty had even called Ashley on the phone, had called her family on the phone, trying to like convince them that Ashley was mistaken, this didn't happen. But as it, spread further and wider, the attacks on her got more and more hateful, some of them denying that she had ever been raped at all. And, it was a lot of just the very common things that you hear um, against a rape victim who does, come out and try to get justice,
Yeah.
accusing her of making it up, or that she really had been having sex with her boyfriend and then just, tried to somehow blame it on this innocent man. So, yeah, she was like many sexual assault victims, she was assaulted not once, but multiple times. She was assaulted by Wayne Dumond, and then she was assaulted by the media and the people who believed the conspiracy theories.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Exactly those words that, yeah, she was repeatedly assaulted. And even and with those backlashes and haters and people who wanted to sweep what happened to her under the rug, or we see that a lot even now. And it's just I mean, for me, it's heartbreaking and disconcerting. I just, because it still happens today, it and people with power, they believe that, um, you know, if you know someone, or someone who has power, then they can do this and do that, and then whatever they did do or didn't do, it could be just like you said, all these conspiracies as to what they did, why, how they were related. It makes me think of that recent case. I can't remember his last name, but um, and just everything snowballs out of control. And I'm sure all this girl wanted to do is get her life back, have some control of her life. And she lost her control once and then all over again repeatedly. So I just
Yeah.
can't imagine that. Um, she's she's seems pretty strong to me to be able to have pushed through and endure that kind of thing.
Yeah, she really did. And when Hu- Mike Huckabee had come out in public right after he became governor and said that he wanted to pardon Wayne Dumond, she went up to Huckabee's office to meet with him personally. She came with her lawyer and another one of Wayne's victims. Wayne had been a serial sexual assaulter and a confessed murderer by that point. Um, and she and her lawyer both commented to the press afterwards that Mike Huckabee didn't seem to care to hear anything they had to say. The lawyer said he didn't even have the basic information about the case. Um, and that Ashley herself said that she'd gotten really frustrated because Huckabee was essentially blowing her off and kind of gaslighting her and telling her that, well, you probably are just mistaken or whatever. And so she was so frustrated that she got really close, like inches away from Mike Huckabee's face, and said, "He was this close to my face. I will never forget what he looks like." And even with that, even hearing that from Ashley and her lawyer and another woman who had been sexually assaulted, and even after people had staged protests at the Capitol, at the Mike Huckabee still chose to find a way to release Wayne Dumond. Um, that's another part of this that's just so tragic.
Exactly, especially after his confessions and um, being convicted and put in prison and then appropriately castrated. But it's just, it just, you know, it,
Yeah,
it
and
reminds me
nobody,
of the powerful people and they just think they can get away with things. And um, why did Huckabee want to release this person?
yeah, is a big part of this story. Is it all really comes down to politics. Mike Huckabee was sort of elevated to the position of governor after being the lieutenant governor. Because of the Whitewater investigation, uh, our governor at the time, Jim Guy Tucker, had gotten swept up in that and was convicted. And because Arkansas State, our Constitution says that you can't serve as governor if you are convicted of a felony. So Jim Guy Tucker had to step down, which elevated Lieutenant Governor Mike Huckabee into the governor's office. Now, the way that Huckabee had become lieutenant had been because he was backed by the Arkansas State Baptist Convention, which at that time was the largest state organization and was one of the most, if not the most powerful political voting blocks. And it still is a pretty powerful voting block in Arkansas. Um, and the reason that he was able to get the Baptist Convention to get their support was because of a minister named J. Cole, who was a crazy conspiracy theorist up here in Northwest Arkansas. And so J. Cole had basically helped Mike Huckabee set up his preaching practice when he first, went out on his own to become a preacher, had helped him set up his television stations and his media outreach, had then helped him become the youngest ever named as the head of the Arkansas State Baptist Convention, and then that helped him get elected as lieutenant governor. So Mike Huckabee kind of owed J. Cole, and J. Cole was really tight with Dusty Dumond, Wayne's wife. J. Cole had an AM talk radio station where he was continually pushing these conspiracy theories that Wayne Dumont was an innocent man, that this was all just Bill Clinton's doing, and that somebody needed to do something to do justice and release Wayne Dumont. And so, about a month after Mike Huckabee was sworn in, he came out and said he wanted to parole Wayne Dumond. And that's what set off, the protests and Ashley's visit to him. And so, what happened was Huckabee saw that there was political blowback to
Mhm.
this, that not he'd been in this sort of bubble of the Baptists and the right wingers who all would believe anything about Bill and Hillary Clinton.
Right.
He saw that this was causing a blowback that he hadn't anticipated. So he was politically savvy enough to sort of back away from it. What he did instead was he called a secret meeting with the parole board, and that was illegal for him to do in the
Yeah.
first place. And then he pressured them to parole Wayne Dumond. And so the head of the parole board at the time, moved some things around, took some actions, did some things that they were eventually able to vote to grant Wayne Dumond his parole. And that way, Mike Huckabee could wash his hands of the matter and be like, well, I didn't pardon him. It was the parole board. I had nothing to do with that, even
Right.
though he absolutely did.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how that played out.
So this guy gets released. Does he commit other
Right.
crimes?
Yeah, he in that time, his wife who had worked so hard for him, Dusty, had died in a car wreck. And so he married, I wouldn't say he fell in love with. I think he just married her because she was useful for him.
Hmm.
But he married another woman named Terry Sue, who lived in the suburbs around Kansas City, Missouri. And so, because he now had a connection to Missouri through that marriage, Missouri agreed to let him transfer his parole to the state of Missouri. So he moves up there, and 6 weeks after he marries Terry Sue, he broke into an apartment and raped and murdered Carol Sue Shields. And it took quite a while for him to get caught because he had no connection with her, right?
Yeah.
Um, they had to rely on DNA evidence from he had left behind some hairs, and she had some of his skin under his fingernails where she had fought him. And so that took a while, to go through the database and find a match. Well, during the time that was, being searched for, he also raped and murdered another woman named Sarah Andrusek. And literally the day after her murder was when the DNA results came back matching Wayne Dumond to Carol Sue Shields' attacker.
And going back, like you mentioned, because he had no connection to the woman, the first woman he raped and murdered in Missouri. Did he have a connection with Ashley or her family? I mean, like, did they know each other, or was she
No.
just another stranger to him that he probably
Yeah,
wished he
no.
killed?
Yeah, no. He doesn't appear to have any connection. But in her case, it was very similar to the other two, Carol Sue Shields and Sarah Andrusek, in that he didn't appear to have any connection. He didn't know them, but he had clearly been watching them.
Yeah,
Because with Ashley, Tuesday, it was a Tuesday that he broke into her home and attacked her, was the only day of the week that she came home from school to an empty house. Normally, her stepmother would have been. The similarity with that and Carol Sue Shields and Sarah Andrusek were that they were at those apartments. So Carol Sue Shield had just arrived at that apartment. It was her boyfriend's apartment, and her boyfriend and his roommate had just left. So literally minutes later was when he came in and assaulted her and killed her. It was the same kind of deal with Sarah Andrusek, that it was literally, you know, minutes later after her husband left the apartment that Wayne broke in and murdered Sarah. So the similarity, not only in the types of crimes and the way he committed the crime, but also that he had clearly been watching and waiting for the time when he knew that they would be alone.
yeah, that just still, I'm sorry, creeps me out. Um, were like the women, obviously he probably did more than just the three. He said he had other sexual assault victims, and he confessed to murder, um, and all that. while getting ready to be paroled, did the I know that some serial killers or some serial rapists, they have like kind of like a type of of victims, and then others just find, like a victim of opportunity, and then they could stalk them or whatever. They don't necessarily have to have any interactions with them until the end.
Yeah, I would say that this was kind of more a crime of opportunity,
Mhm.
um, just because, they were different, they looked different, they were different ages. I think he was just looking for a woman that would be alone and that he felt like he could get away with this.
Yeah, yeah, I can I can see that. There's probably something in them that he saw and latched onto them, and then just waited for, he knew when they were going to be alone. So
Yeah,
it's just kind of scary. Um, how long
yeah.
did it take you to like? I mean, this is like the case starts, 1984, but how long did it take you to kind of go through the research and weed out what is relevant and what was just like folklore or legend?
Oh my gosh. I have actually been working on this book for several years. Um, I have a full-time job, and so it was just kind of evenings and weekends. And so, years and years of digging into various aspects of the case.
Mhm.
And then, as I went along and seeing more and more of the connections between the conspiracy theories about Wayne Dumond, about his case, and the conspiracy theories that are now like becoming a mainstream part of a lot of the media now, and in our politics, that was kind of more of the surprise. Like I kind of knew there was a connection, but tracing it down and getting really granular about how it leaped from one place to the next, that was really eye-opening and was probably the hardest part of my research. But yeah, I had started working on this in earnest probably in 2020.
Wow. So if you could read, if you have a little excerpt you'd like to read for the audience before we close out the show, I would appreciate that.
Okay, well, I will start with the introduction, um, and that's set in Washington, D.C. in 2016. Comet Ping Pong doesn't particularly stand out. For the most part, it blends in with the other cafes and art galleries on Connecticut Avenue in Washington, D.C. The outdoor seating area, which takes up about half of the wide pedestrian sidewalk in front of the shop, is nearly obscured by a wall of potted plants. But it does have one eye-catching feature, a large retro neon sign originally made for Comet Liquor that co-founder James Alefantis discovered at a flea market and, quote, couldn't live without. Inside, its true hipster appeal becomes clearer. Designed by the architectural firm Core, the award-winning interior features layers of colorful plaster on the walls, polished concrete floors, and 16-foot ceilings with exposed timber beams and skylights. The booths are made with reclaimed wood seats, and a sculptural pizza oven anchors the bar. But it's not just about the aesthetic. Comet Ping Pong has been ranked among the best pizza joints in DC by local food critics. It's also been featured in national publications like Food and Wine and Southern Living, and it was even featured on a 2010 episode of Guy Fieri's Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, where he dubbed their calzones some of the best I've ever had. Besides serving brunch and a nice selection of craft brews, Natch, Comet regularly hosts live music, and of course, they have ping pong tables. While it's a popular local establishment, waits for a table on the weekends can be pretty long. It wasn't really known much outside of DC, that is, until 2016. Not long before the November election, Elephantus's Instagram posts started getting flooded with comments, and his DMs started blowing up with some of the most hateful and ugly things you could imagine. Hundreds of strangers were suddenly accusing him of being a pedophile and a child trafficker. He started receiving death threats. Soon the accusations and threats were showing up on all his social media, as well as those of Comet Ping Pong and its staff. That's how he discovered hashtag Pizzagate, quote, an insanely complicated, made-up, fictional, lie-based story, unquote, alleging that the Clintons and John Podesta, among others, were performing satanic rituals and running a child sex trafficking ring out of the basement of Comet Ping Pong, which doesn't actually have a basement. Alefantis and others in the reality-based community thought it had to be a joke, but the accusations and death threats were very real. Alefantis said he reached out to Facebook and Twitter to get them to take down the unhinged content, to no avail. He said he reached out to the police and FBI, but that went nowhere too. Confused as to why he was being targeted by what was clearly a coordinated political attack, Alefantis did some sleuthing to try and figure out what was going on. According to cybersecurity experts interviewed in Rolling Stone, the conspiracy theory that would eventually mutate into Pizzagate first emerged in July of 2016. That's when a 4chan user called FBI Anon, who claimed to be a, quote, high-level analyst and strategist for the FBI, hosted an Ask Me Anything. In it, they claimed that the Clintons liked foreign donors so much because they would, quote, pay in children as well as money, and that Hillary Clinton had sexually abused captive girls. Then, near the end of October, the conspiracy theory spread to other platforms, including Reddit and 3rant, an anonymous message board for New York City police. Someone using the handle Fat Old Man posted that he had a, quote, hot rumor about the FBI investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails. He claimed the FBI had been forced to reopen the case because the NYPD's sex crimes unit had to get involved. Apparently, someone then shared that post to a law enforcement group on Facebook, where a user called Carmen Katz saw it. Again, according to Rolling Stone, the first Facebook post featuring hashtag Pizzagate appeared on October 29, 2016, the day after then FBI Director James Comey announced the Bureau would be reopening its investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server while she was Secretary of State. Part of that investigation included data found on Anthony Weiner's laptop, including references to Comet Ping Pong and Alefantis, a Democrat who had donated to both Obama's and Hillary's presidential campaigns, and an ex-boyfriend of David Brock, a former right-wing operative turned Democrat. On Facebook, Katz posted, quote, my NYPD source said it's much more vile and serious than classified material on Weiner's device. The email detailed the trip made by Weiner, Bill, and Hillary on their pedophile billionaire friend's plane, the Lolita Express. Yep, Hillary has a well-documented predilection for underage girls. We're talking an international child enslavement and sex ring, unquote. Within 12 hours of Katz's post, Twitter account at David Goldberg NY, which is in all likelihood a bot, tweeted a screenshot of her post twice with the caption, I've been hearing the same thing from my NYPD buddies. One of those tweets was retweeted almost 6,400 times. Soon, the Pizzagate hashtag was being shared and reposted millions of times, including by more than 3,000 accounts that were likely bots. Some of the most frequent Pizzagate tweeters were linked with Russia's Internet Research Agency. Nearly 6 dozen people associated with the 2016 Trump campaign followed several of these Russian accounts pushing the Pizzagate conspiracy theory, and they helped spread it. But what pushed Pizzagate from social media into a much wider, real-world audience was the November 2nd episode of Alex Jones's InfoWars, aired just 4 days after the Katz post. In that episode, he hosted Douglas Hagman, who himself hosts a webcast called The Hagman Report. In front of an audience of 7.7 million, Hagman accused Hillary Clinton of participating in Epstein's sex trafficking plane, Lolita Express. As hateful as the segment was, it wasn't anything out of the ordinary for InfoWars. Jones had long spread hateful conspiracy theories about the Clintons. He's called Hillary evil and an abject psychopathic demon, and has accused her of raping and murdering children. Immediately after the Katz post, and for the 3 days prior to the Hagman episode, his shows were titled Hillary Clinton Goes Full Tinfoil Hat, Hillary Clinton Lifelong Rape Enabler, and Hillary Clinton's Plans to Rig Election Leaked. His literal demonization of Hillary continued after the election. His November 23rd episode was titled Pizzagate is Real. Only 4 days later, he spent a half hour explaining the conspiracy theory on his show before releasing a separate video titled Down the Pizzagate Rabbit Hole. His December 1st episode was titled Pizzagate, The Biggest Picture. One of Jones' millions of followers was a soft-spoken North Carolina man named Edgar Madison Welsh.
Wow. That is very powerful, especially the way you read it. I really enjoyed having you on the show, and I enjoyed going through this incredible true crime story. I mean, when you think about it, real life is sometimes a lot stranger than fiction or something anyone can conjure up, for a story. It's very remarkable.
It is. If I had tried to pitch this as a script for a fictional movie, I would have been turned down that it was too insane.
Exactly. It's incredible. But thank you so much for being on the show. If you wish
Thank you.
you or your book to be on the show, go to amysbookshelfreviews.com/podcast. Thank you for listening. Be safe, be well, and always be kind.
Thank you for listening to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews. If you are looking to be on the podcast or looking for a book review, you can go to amysbookshelfreviews.com and look for the appropriate navigational menu. Again, thank you all for listening and being a supporter of this podcast and of the Amy's Bookshelf Reviews professional reviewers of books and audiobooks. Thank you all. Be safe and be well.